Why does everyone want to destroy Israel? The hidden truth. A country smaller than the state of New Jersey, surrounded by nations that publicly declare their desire to destroy it. 7 wars in 75 years of existence. Constant missile attacks from 3 different borders. Why is Israel the only country in the world whose existence is constantly questioned in the United Nations? And why, despite all this, does it not only survive but thrive as a military, technological and economic powerhouse? Have you ever wondered why such a small country generates so much controversy? Why are there more UN resolutions against Israel than against North Korea, Syria, Iran and China combined? In this video, you'll discover the historical, religious and geopolitical reasons that transformed Israel into the most hated and simultaneously most protected country on the planet. We'll go beyond sensationalist headlines and reveal the facts that mainstream media rarely explains in depth. If you want to truly understand the most complex conflict of the 21st century, the interests that move entire nations, and why this small piece of land in the Middle East influences everything from oil prices to elections in the United States, stay until the end. Because after this video, you'll never watch the news about Israel the same way again. Prepare to have your view on international geopolitics completely transformed. Fact 1. Israel is the only country whose existence is constantly questioned at the UN. Let's start with a fact that shocks most people. Since its creation in 1948, Israel has been the target of more condemnatory resolutions in the United Nations General Assembly than all other countries in the world combined. This is not an exaggeration, it's documented fact. Between 2015 and 2022, the UN General Assembly adopted 140 resolutions against Israel. In the same period, only 68 resolutions were directed at the rest of the entire world. This means that a country representing 0.1% of the world's population receives more than 67% of all UN condemnations. Think about that for a moment. While genocides were happening in Sudan, while North Korea maintained modern concentration camps, while China violently repressed the Uyghurs, while Syria used chemical weapons against civilians, the UN was busy approving dozens of resolutions against Israel. But why? The answer has to do with the composition of the UN. Of the 193 member countries, 57 are Islamic majority nations, forming the largest voting bloc in the organization. These countries, through the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, systematically coordinate their votes against Israel. Add to this countries aligned ideologically or economically with the Arab world, and you have an automatic majority in almost any Israel-related vote. Former UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon publicly admitted in 2016 that there is a disproportionate bias against Israel at the United Nations. He stated, "Dozens of resolutions, reports and investigative mechanisms are dedicated to Israel, while much larger atrocities elsewhere receive far less attention." But here's what nobody tells you. This institutional hostility didn't start recently. It started the moment Israel was founded. In 1947, the UN approved the Palestine Partition Plan, creating 2 states, one Jewish and one Arab. The Jews accepted, the Arabs rejected it, and declared war the day after Israel's independence. 7 Arab armies simultaneously invaded the newborn state of Israel with the explicit objective of throwing the Jews into the sea. Israel survived, and since then it has never been forgiven for it. Israel's existence challenges a narrative that has dominated the Middle East for 400 years, absolute Islamic supremacy in that region. For many Arab and Islamic countries, the presence of a Jewish state in territory they consider historically Muslim is theologically unacceptable. And that's why Israel doesn't just face territorial or political conflicts. It faces existential denial. It's not about borders, it's about the right to exist. Fact 2. The most disputed land in history has changed hands 100 times. If you think the Israel-Palestine conflict started in 1948, you've been misled. The truth is that this specific region of the Middle East is the most conquered, reconquered, and disputed land in all human history. Archaeologists and historians have documented at least 100 changes of sovereignty over Jerusalem over the last 3,000 years. Let's take a quick trip through time. 1000 BC. King David conquers Jerusalem and establishes the capital of the Kingdom of Israel. For the first time in history, that land has a centralized Jewish government. 586 BC. Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon destroys Jerusalem and the first temple, deporting the Jews. 539 BC. The Persians conquer Babylon and allow the Jews to return and build the second temple. 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquers the region, bringing Greek influence. 63 BC, Rome conquers Jerusalem. The region becomes a Roman province. 70 AD, after a Jewish revolt, Rome destroys the Second Temple and massacres hundreds of thousands of Jews. 135 AD, after another revolt, Emperor Hadrian expels the Jews from Jerusalem and renames the region from Judea to Syria Palestina, a name derived from the Philistines, ancient enemies of the Jews, in a deliberate attempt to erase the Jewish connection to the land. 638 AD, Arab Muslim armies conquer Jerusalem from the Byzantine Empire. The Islamization of the region begins. 1099 AD, Christian crusaders conquer Jerusalem in one of the bloodiest military campaigns of the Middle Ages. 1187 AD, Saladin reconquers Jerusalem for the Islamic world. 1517 AD, the Ottoman Empire, Turkish, conquers the region, which remains under Turkish control for 400 years. 1917 AD, the British conquer the region from the Ottomans in World War I. 1948 AD, Israel declares independence. Arabs invade. Israel wins. Now here's what nobody tells you. In this entire 3,000-year history, only the Jews established Jerusalem as their capital. Neither the Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Crusaders, Turks, nor British made Jerusalem their capital. It was always a provincial or regional city for all other empires. But for the Jews, Jerusalem has always been the spiritual, political, and cultural center. Even during 2,000 years of exile, daily Jewish prayers mentioned Jerusalem. Jewish weddings ended with the promise, "If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill." So when someone says that the Jews stole the land from the Palestinians, that person is ignoring 3,000 years of complex history, where dozens of empires controlled that region, and where the Jewish presence is the oldest and most documented of all. The inconvenient truth? There is no people called Palestinians with independent national history before the 20th century. During the 400 years of Ottoman rule, the region's inhabitants were simply subjects of the Turkish Empire. When the British took over in 1917, all inhabitants, Jews, Arabs, Christians, were called Palestinians. In fact, the first Hebrew newspaper in the region was called the Palestine Post, today Jerusalem Post. Palestinian national identity, as we know it today, crystallized mainly as opposition to Zionism, not as an independent millennial identity. And this truth is hidden because it challenges the narrative of white European colonizers stealing land from natives. Reality is infinitely more complex. Fact 3. Israel faces enemies who literally want its total destruction. Most international conflicts are about territory, resources, or influence, but the conflict involving Israel is fundamentally different. It's not about adjusting borders or negotiating terms. It's about elimination. Let's look at facts that rarely appear in headlines. Hamas, the organization that has governed Gaza since 2007, has in its founding charter, Article 7, the explicit declaration, "The day of judgment will not come until the Muslims fight the Jews and kill them." It doesn't say Israelis, it says Jews. It's genocidal by definition. Hezbollah, the Lebanese organization financed by Iran, declared through its leader Hassan Nasrallah in 2002, If all the Jews gather in Israel, it will save us the trouble of hunting them down around the world. Again, it's not about politics. It's about extermination. Iran. The Iranian regime regularly, in official speeches, promises to wipe Israel off the map. Former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said this publicly dozens of times. The current supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, maintains a countdown on his official website for what he calls the final liberation of Palestine, a euphemism for Israel's destruction. Islamic Jihad. Another terrorist organization in Gaza, whose name already reveals its ideology, doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist within any borders. Now, compare this with normal territorial conflicts. When Argentina and Chile dispute territory, neither side wants to eliminate the other country. When India and Pakistan fight over Kashmir, despite nuclear tension, neither wants to erase the other from the map. When Russia and Ukraine go to war, it's about territorial control, not about denying the right of Ukrainians to exist. But with Israel, the stated objective of multiple regional actors is its complete destruction. And here's the part that the media rarely mentions. Israel has already offered to return territories in exchange for peace multiple times. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, Israel offered to return the captured territories, Sinai Peninsula, Gaza, West Bank, Golan Heights, in exchange for peace and recognition. The Arab League's response at the Khartoum summit was clear. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiation with Israel. In 2000, Prime Minister Ehud Barak offered Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat 97% of the West Bank, all of Gaza and East Jerusalem as capital of a Palestinian state. Arafat rejected it and launched the Second Intifada, a wave of suicide terrorism that killed more than 1,000 Israelis. In 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza, evacuating all settlers and military bases. It handed over the complete territory to the Palestinians. The response, Hamas took power in 2007 and since then has launched more than 20,000 rockets at Israeli civilians. In 2008, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert made an even more generous offer. 94% of the West Bank with land swaps compensating for the 6% division of Jerusalem, and even agreed to discuss the symbolic return of some refugees. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas asked for time to think and never responded. The inconvenient truth: each territorial concession by Israel was followed not by peace, but by more violence. Because the problem isn't the borders, the problem is the existence. And when you understand this, you understand why the conflict has persisted for 75 years. There is no diplomatic solution when one of the parties doesn't accept your existence under any circumstances. Fact 4. Israel is the only democratic country in a region of dictatorships. Here's something rarely mentioned in discussions about Israel. It's the only full democracy in the Middle East, and this isn't opinion. It's measured by independent international organizations. The Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index classifies Israel as a full democracy, with a score of 7.93 out of 10. For comparison, no Arab country reaches this category. The highest ranked, Tunisia and Lebanon, are considered flawed democracies. The vast majority are classified as authoritarian regime. Let's look at details the media ignores. Press freedom. Israel has one of the world's freest and most critical presses. Israeli newspapers openly criticize the government without censorship. Meanwhile, in neighboring countries, journalists are arrested, tortured, or killed for criticizing authorities. Women's rights. In Israel, women vote, drive, wear what they want, hold political offices, including prime minister, serve in the armed forces in combat positions, and have equal rights guaranteed by law. In neighboring countries, Saudi Arabia only allowed women to drive in 2018. In Iran, women are arrested for not wearing hijab correctly. In Gaza, under Hamas, women face severe restrictions on movement and dress. LGBT rights. Israel holds the largest LGBT pride parade in the Middle East in Tel Aviv, with hundreds of thousands of participants. Same-sex couples have legal protection. Meanwhile, in all neighboring territories, homosexuality is a crime, punishable by imprisonment or death. Religious freedom. Israel is the only country in the Middle East where Christians are increasing in population. All religions are protected by law. Mosques, churches and synagogues coexist. Israeli Muslims have complete freedom of worship. Meanwhile, Arab countries prohibit synagogues, Christian churches face persecution, and religious minorities are systematically discriminated against. Political representation. The Israeli parliament, Knesset, has Arab members who vote, propose laws, and openly criticize the government. Arab parties participate in government coalitions. Israeli Arabs are judges, including on the Supreme Court. Compare this with Arab countries, where minorities rarely have significant representation. Here's the supreme irony that nobody discusses. Israeli Arabs have more rights, freedoms, and quality of life than Arabs in virtually any Arab country. They have the right to vote, freedom of expression, access to universal healthcare, free education, and equal legal protection. Surveys show that the majority of Israeli Arabs, when asked, prefer to live in Israel than in a future Palestinian state. Why? Because they live in a functional democracy with rule of law, not in a corrupt dictatorship. But here's what international media rarely shows. When Israel is criticized for apartheid, the term is historically inaccurate and offensive. Apartheid in South Africa meant racial segregation by law, prohibition of interracial marriages, separate and inferior education for blacks, prohibition of blacks voting, and systematic exclusion of blacks from public areas. None of this exists in Israel. Arabs and Jews study at the same universities, work in the same hospitals, serve in the same courts, use the same buses, frequent the same beaches. Interreligious marriages are legal. Arabs vote and are elected. So why the accusation of apartheid? Because delegitimizing Israel democratically is more effective than attacking it militarily. If you can convince the world that Israel is an illegitimate racist state, you don't need armies to destroy it. You use international isolation, boycotts, sanctions. The truth, Israel is the only nation in the region where religious minorities, women and LGBT have full rights. And it's exactly why it's hated by neighboring authoritarian regimes. Because its existence exposes their moral bankruptcy. Fact 5, the information war. How Israel lost the battle of narratives. Here's something that will shock you. Israel wins all military wars, but is completely losing the information war. And this may be the most dangerous threat it faces. Let's look at the numbers. Western universities are full of Middle Eastern studies departments financed by Arab petrodollars. Between 2011 and 2020, American universities received more than $4 billion in donations from Arab countries, mainly Qatar and Saudi Arabia. These donations aren't neutral. They come with influence over curriculum, faculty hiring, and research direction. The result? A generation of Western students being educated with a consistently anti-Israel narrative, not critical, anti-existence. On social media, the disparity is even greater. Arab countries and Iran invest millions in troll farms, bots, and paid influencers to disseminate anti-Israel propaganda. The hashtag Free Palestine has billions of views. Meanwhile, pro-Israel content is routinely reported, removed, or shadow banned. At the UN and international organizations, the situation is worse. The UN Human Rights Council, which includes members like Venezuela, China, and Pakistan, countries with terrible human rights records, dedicates more attention to Israel than to all other countries combined. It has a permanent agenda item just to criticize Israel, the only country with this privilege. In international media, there's a clear pattern. When Palestinians die, it's international headlines for days. When Israelis die in terrorist attacks, it receives minimal coverage. When Israel reacts militarily after being attacked, it's called aggression. When Hamas launches rockets at Israeli civilians, it's called resistance. A concrete example. In 2021, during 11 days of conflict, Hamas launched more than 4,000 rockets at Israeli civilian cities. Israel responded with precision airstrikes against Hamas military targets. Media coverage focused almost exclusively on Palestinian casualties, ignoring that Israel was defending itself from indiscriminate bombardment. Here's what's rarely mentioned. Israel developed the world's most sophisticated system to minimize civilian casualties in war zones. Before bombing military targets in Gaza, Israel 1. Warns in advance through phone calls, text messages, and leaflets. 2. Uses the roof-knocking technique, launches non-explosive ammunition on the roof to warn occupants to evacuate before the actual attack. 3. Aborts missions if it detects civilian presence, even losing the element of surprise. No army in the world does this. During American bombings in Iraq or Afghanistan, there were no prior warnings. During Russian bombings in Syria, civilians were deliberate targets. But Israel is the only one internationally criticized for its military operations. Why? Because there's an entire industry dedicated to delegitimizing Israel. NGOs that present themselves as neutral human rights defenders are financed by Arab and anti-Israel European governments. They produce one-sided reports, focusing exclusively on Israeli actions while ignoring Palestinian terrorism. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, all have been caught fabricating or distorting evidence against Israel, but their reports are still cited as impartial by international media. The truth? Israel faces a double standard unprecedented in modern history. When 500,000 Syrians were killed in civil war, there were minimal protests. When China puts 1 million Uyghurs in camps, the world continues doing business as usual. When Russia invades Ukraine, there's condemnation, but not global boycotts. But when Israel kills terrorists who just massacred Israeli civilians, protests in 50 countries, university boycotts, artists cancelling shows. Israel is losing the narrative war because the truth is complex, requires context, and doesn't fit in a tweet. Meanwhile, Israel de ses oppressors is simple, emotional, and viral. And this may be the ultimate existential threat, because when you delegitimize a country to the point where its defense is seen as aggression, you prepare the ground for its destruction. Fact 6. The religious factor. Nobody wants to admit. Let's talk about the elephant in the room that Western secular media refuses to acknowledge. The Israel-Palestine conflict has deeply religious roots. And until you understand this, you'll never understand why it's so intractable. In Islam, there's a concept called waqf. Land that was once under Islamic control must remain Islamic forever. It's non-negotiable. It's not about justice or self-determination. It's theological. The Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, was controlled by Muslims for 800 years before the Christian Reconquista in 1492. To this day, radical Islamic groups refer to Spain as Al-Andalus and consider its liberation a future religious obligation. This isn't a joke, it's doctrine. If Spain, after 530 years, is still seen as territory to be reconquered, imagine Israel, where Islamic control began only in 638 AD and where Jews had continuous presence even under Muslim rule. Here's what nobody tells you. Jerusalem is mentioned 667 times in the Hebrew Bible. It's mentioned 0 times in the Quran. Mecca is mentioned hundreds of times in the Quran. Jerusalem, not once. The Islamic connection to Jerusalem comes from an interpretation of a single Quran passage, Surah 17-1, about Muhammad's night journey to the farthest mosque. Later, Islamic scholars interpreted this as reference to Jerusalem, despite there being no mosque there in Muhammad's time. During the 1300 years of Islamic control over Jerusalem with interruptions, the city was never the capital of any Islamic empire. Damascus, Baghdad, Cairo, and Constantinople were capitals. Jerusalem was not. During Ottoman rule, 1517–1917, Jerusalem was a decaying provincial city. Visitor accounts describe it as dirty, impoverished, and sparsely populated. It only gained importance again when Jews began returning in significant numbers in the late 19th century. But here's the truth few admit: Jerusalem's importance to the Muslim world increases proportionally to the Jewish presence there. The more Jews in Jerusalem, the more sacred it becomes to Islam. It's reactive, not intrinsic. During the 1948 War of Independence, when Jordan controlled East Jerusalem and the West Bank, no Arab leader visited. No Arab country proposed making East Jerusalem the capital of a Palestinian state. There was no Palestinian liberation movement. Why? Because Jews weren't there. From 1948 to 1967, when Jordan controlled the Jewish holy sites in East Jerusalem, synagogues were destroyed, Jewish cemeteries desecrated, Jews prohibited from visiting the Western Wall. The international community remained silent. But when Israel captured East Jerusalem in 1967 and immediately guaranteed access to all holy sites of all religions, international condemnation. Here's the irony. Under Israeli control, everyone has access to holy sites. Muslims control the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Christians control the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Jews have access to the Western Wall, all that remains of the temple destroyed by the Romans. But radical Islamic groups don't want shared access. They want exclusive control, and they call it desecration, when Jews simply visit the Temple Mount, the holiest place in Judaism. The inconvenient theological truth? Judaism doesn't seek to convert others or conquer the world. There's no Jewish jihad. There's no religious imperative to control Mecca or Rome. But in radical Islam, there's a clear imperative: recover all lands that were once Islamic and expand Islam globally. Israel represents an unacceptable theological reversal. Islamic land returned to infidel control. And for ideologies that see history as an inevitable arc toward global Islamic domination, Israel is an anomaly that must be corrected. This religious dimension is why peace through territorial concessions is impossible, no matter how many square kilometers Israel offers. The problem isn't the size, it's the existence. And until the international community confronts this theological reality, it will continue proposing solutions that ignore the root of the conflict. Fact 7. Israel transformed desert into technological powerhouse. Here's something that should be world headline news but is rarely mentioned. Israel transformed unproductive desert into one of the planet's most innovative economies in just 75 years. It's an economic miracle unprecedented in modern history. Let's look at numbers nobody tells you. Startups per capita. Israel has more startups per capita than any other country in the world. There are more than 6,000 active startups in a country of 9 million inhabitants. That's more than France, Germany, and the United Kingdom combined. R&D investment. Israel invests 5.4% of its GDP in research and development, the highest percentage in the world. For comparison, the US invests 3.1%, China 2.4%. Nasdaq companies. Israel has more companies listed on Nasdaq than any country except the US and China, more than Japan, South Korea, and India combined. But here's what's really impressive. Israel did this while facing Arab boycotts, constant wars, and having to spend 5–6% of GDP on defense, one of the highest percentages in the world. Imagine trying to build an economy while your neighbors declare existential war against you. You need to maintain universal military conscription. You have no oil or significant natural resources. 60% of your territory is desert. You face economic boycotts from 22 Arab countries. And yet, Israel made the desert green. Israel is the only country in the world with more trees today than it had 100 years ago. Through drip irrigation techniques, invented in Israel, it transformed the Negev desert into productive agricultural land, solved the water crisis. Israel recycles 90% of its sewage water for agriculture, more than any other country. It developed desalination on an industrial scale, becoming an exporter of water technology to the world. Dominated high technology. Israel is a world leader in cybersecurity, medical technology, agritech, and artificial intelligence. Companies like Waze, Mobileye, Viber, and hundreds of others are Israeli, created leading military industry. Without access to foreign weapons due to embargoes, Israel developed its own defense industry. Today, it exports billions in advanced military systems, including drones, missiles, and air defense technology. Here's the question nobody asks. How did such a new country, under constant existential threat, achieve this? The answer is in culture, not resources. Israel valued education above all. It invested heavily in universities when it was still poor. It created a culture of innovation, questioning, and entrepreneurship. It encouraged risk-taking. And crucially, it leveraged the human capital of immigrants from more than 100 countries. Compare with oil-rich Arab countries. Saudi Arabia has per capita income similar to Israel, but almost zero technological innovation. It has one of the world's largest oil reserves, but can't even adequately refine its own oil, depending on Western technology. Why? Because wealth based on natural resources doesn't require innovation, doesn't require quality education, doesn't require freedom of thought. Israel had no choice. Without natural resources, surrounded by enemies, the only option was to be smarter, more innovative, more efficient than everyone else. And it worked. Today, Israel's GDP per capita is higher than Japan, France, and the United Kingdom. It's higher than all Arab countries except small Gulf oil states. But here's what international media rarely shows. This Israeli innovation saves lives globally. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Israel developed treatments, vaccines, and protocols that were adopted worldwide. Israeli medical technology operates in hospitals in 120 countries. Israeli irrigation systems feed millions in Africa and Asia. The irony, countries that publicly boycott Israel secretly use Israeli technology. Israeli chips are in Arab phones. Israeli security software protects Arab banks. Israeli agricultural technology feeds Arab populations. The truth nobody wants to admit. If the Arab boycott against Israel were taken seriously, Arab economies would collapse. They depend on Western technology, and Israel is embedded in the global technology supply chain. Israel proved that a country without resources can prosper through intelligence, work, and freedom. And this challenges ideologies that prefer victimization to personal responsibility. It's easier to blame Israel for problems than to face decades of poor governance, corruption, and authoritarianism. Fact 8. The strategic alliance with the US. Why does America protect Israel? Here's the question that always comes up. Why does the United States support Israel so consistently? Many believe in conspiracy theories about Jewish lobby controlling Washington. Reality is much more pragmatic and strategic. Let's look at facts that are rarely explained clearly. Shared intelligence. Israel has one of the world's most effective intelligence services, Mossad, Shin Bet, and Amman, military intelligence. Israel shares critical intelligence with the US about terrorism, enemy nuclear programs, and regional threats. During the Cold War, Israel provided the US with a captured Soviet MiG fighter, allowing them to study enemy technology. This alone was worth billions. Military testing ground. American weapons are tested in real combat conditions through Israel. The Iron Dome system, developed with American support, proved itself by intercepting thousands of rockets. This experience is invaluable for American defense. Drone systems, cyber warfare, and anti-missile defense developed in Israel benefit American military. Regional counterbalance. In the Middle East, Israel is the US's only reliable ally. Saudi Arabia is an ally when convenient, but financed 9/11 terrorism. Egypt is politically unstable. Iraq and Afghanistan cost trillions and ended in failure. Israel is stable, democratic, and aligned with Western interests. Economic return. The US provides approximately $3.8 billion annually in military aid to Israel. But 75% of that money must be spent on American weapons. It's essentially a subsidy to the American defense industry. And Israeli technology developed with this partnership returns to the US, generating billions in return on investment. Technological innovation. Israeli technology companies attract billions in American investment. Apple, Google, Microsoft, Intel, and practically every American technology company has R&D centers in Israel. Israeli innovation feeds the American economy. Now, let's look at the political part few understand. Pro-Israel lobby is not primarily Jewish. The largest pro-Israel support group in the US is evangelical Christians, about 70 million people. They support Israel for theological reasons, believing in biblical prophecy about the return of Jews to the Promised Land. This voting bloc is massive and politically influential. Bipartisan support. Unlike most American issues, Israel has support from both Republicans and Democrats. Historically, Democrats supported Israel as much as Republicans. Only recently has the American progressive left begun adopting anti-Israel narratives. Quantifiable strategic value. An American general estimated that Israel is worth 5 American aircraft carriers. Maintaining 5 aircraft carriers in the Middle East would cost tens of billions annually. Israel provides regional military presence for a fraction of that cost. But here's the truth nobody wants to hear. If Israel disappeared tomorrow, the US would lose its only reliable outpost in one of the world's most strategic regions. Islamic radicals wouldn't stop with Israel. They've already declared the US the Great Satan. Israel is the front line in a larger ideological conflict between the West and Islamic extremism. The irony, Arab countries are secretly aligning with Israel against Iran. The Abraham Accords, 2020, normalized relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. Why? Because they realized Israel isn't the enemy. Expansionist Iran is. The geopolitical truth, Israel is the only country in the Middle East that doesn't harbor terrorists, doesn't finance global radicalism, doesn't threaten neighbors, shares Western democratic values, contributes positively to global science and technology, and it's exactly why it must be destroyed, according to its enemies. Because it represents everything theocratic authoritarian regimes hate: freedom, democracy, secularism, equal rights, and prosperity through merit. Fact 9. The Palestinian refugees, the only refugee population that has grown for 75 years. Here's one of the most manipulated facts of the conflict. The number of Palestinian refugees increases each year, instead of decreasing. In 1948, there were approximately 700,000 Palestinian refugees. Today, according to UNRWA, UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, there are more than 5.6 million. How does a refugee population increase 800% in 75 years? The answer exposes one of the greatest frauds in international politics. First, understand how refugees normally work. After World War II, there were 60 million refugees in Europe. The UN created UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, to resettle them. Within a few decades, the problem was solved. Refugees were integrated into new countries, rebuilt lives, stopped being refugees. After the partition of India in 1947, 14 million people were displaced, Muslims to Pakistan, Hindus to India. Today, none of them are considered refugees. They were absorbed. After Israel's independence in 1948, approximately 700,000 Arabs fled or were expelled. In the same period, 850,000 Jews were expelled from Arab countries. Jews were absorbed by Israel. Arabs. They were kept in refugee camps by Arab countries. Here's the shocking truth. Arab countries deliberately refused to integrate Palestinian refugees. Egypt controlled Gaza from 1948 to 1967, 19 years, but never gave citizenship to Palestinians there. Jordan controlled the West Bank for 19 years, but most Palestinians didn't receive full citizenship. Why? Because Palestinian refugees were more useful as a political weapon against Israel. Keeping generations in refugee camps in perpetual poverty created hatred against Israel and generated international sympathy. But here's the truly scandalous part. UNRWA has a unique definition of refugee that only applies to Palestinians. For all other refugees in the world, status ends when you resettle, but for Palestinians, status is hereditary. Children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren of original refugees are considered refugees, even if they were born in other countries, never set foot in Palestine, and have citizenship elsewhere. This doesn't exist for any other refugee group in history. It's unique to Palestinians. The result? UNRWA perpetuates the problem it should solve. With an annual budget of more than $1 billion, the agency employs thousands of people. If the refugee problem were solved, UNRWA would lose its reason to exist. There's institutional incentive to keep refugees as refugees. Investigations revealed that UNRWA schools in Gaza and the West Bank teach Palestinian children to hate Jews, glorify terrorism, and use textbooks that deny Israel's right to exist. The UN, theoretically neutral, is educating generations to perpetuate conflict. Here's the comparison nobody makes. Israel absorbed 850,000 Jewish refugees from Arab countries with a tiny GDP in the 1950s. It integrated them, gave them citizenship, opportunities. Today their descendants are full Israelis. Arab countries with trillions in oil wealth have kept Palestinians in camps for 75 years. Lebanon prohibits Palestinians from working in dozens of professions. Syria kept them in camps without basic rights. No Arab country offered mass citizenship. The inconvenient truth? Arab and Palestinian leaders want refugees to remain refugees, because the real solution, resettlement and integration, would mean the end of the political weapon against Israel. And here's the explicit plan rarely discussed. Palestinians demand right of return for all 5.6 million refugees and their descendants into Israel's borders. If implemented, this would instantly make Jews a minority in Israel, effectively destroying the Jewish state through demographics. That's the goal. It's not about justice for refugees. It's about eliminating Israel. The humane solution would be what happened with all other refugees in history: resettlement, financial compensation, integration. But this would require Palestinian leaders and Arab countries to place the welfare of real people above political agendas. And that will never happen as long as Israel serves as a convenient scapegoat for all the Arab world's problems. Fact 10. The real human cost. Both sides suffer, but only one is blamed. Let's talk about something extremely sensitive. Civilian deaths. International media focuses intensely on dead Palestinians, presenting numbers without context. Let's put the facts in perspective. Between 2000 and 2023, approximately 10,000 Palestinians died in the conflict with Israel. Each death is a tragedy. But context matters. Syria, more than 500,000 dead in civil war, 2011-2023. Where are the global protests? Yemen, More than 350,000 dead, including 85,000 children dead from starvation. Saudi-led coalition bombs hospitals and markets. Where's the Saudi Arabia boycott? Uyghurs in China. More than 1 million in concentration camps. Forced labor, forced sterilization. Companies continue doing business with China. The uncomfortable truth: the international community applies a double standard to Israel. When Arabs kill Arabs, there's indifference. When Israel kills terrorists who hide among civilians, there's global outrage. Now let's talk about what the media doesn't show. Hamas uses civilians as human shields. This isn't an Israeli claim. It's documented by independent organizations. Hamas stores rockets in schools, mosques and hospitals. They launch rockets from residential areas. They build terror tunnels under civilian homes. Why? Because if Israel doesn't retaliate, Hamas wins. If Israel retaliates and civilians die, Hamas wins the propaganda war. It's a cynical and diabolical strategy. Use your own people as human shields and then display their bodies for international cameras. According to UN data, the civilian-to-combatant death ratio in Israeli military operations in Gaza is approximately 1 civilian for every combatant. Compare that to US military operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, 3.4 civilians per combatant. In World War II urban bombings, the ratio was 10 or more civilians per combatant. Israel has the lowest civilian casualty rate in modern urban warfare. How? Through 1. Advance warnings, phone calls, text messages, and flyers warning civilians to evacuate before strikes. 2. Precision munitions, guided missiles targeting specific objectives, not area bombings. 3. Mission cancellations. Operations are aborted if civilians are detected, even if it means losing the target. 4. Humanitarian aid. Israel provides electricity, water, and allows tons of aid into Gaza during conflicts. Name another country that supplies resources to a territory that bombards it daily. Here's what no one mentions. Israel treats injured Palestinians in Israeli hospitals, including Hamas members. Thousands of Palestinians receive medical care in Israel every year, even while Hamas vows to destroy it. Compare that to what would happen if an Israeli wandered into Gaza. They'd be kidnapped, tortured, and executed on video for propaganda. About the tunnels. Hamas built over 500 kilometers, 310 miles, of tunnels under Gaza. These tunnels cost hundreds of millions of dollars, money that should have gone to education, healthcare, and civilian infrastructure. Instead, it was spent on terrorist infrastructure. Meanwhile, Hamas blames Israel for Gaza's poverty. The truth? Gaza has received more international aid per capita than any region in the world since World War II. Billions in aid. Where did it go? Into tunnels, rockets, and the bank accounts of Hamas leaders living in luxury in Qatar. Hamas leader Khaled Mashal has an estimated net worth of $2.6 billion. Meanwhile, Gazans live in poverty. But Israel is blamed for Gaza's economic condition? Here's the final comparison. Israel completely evacuated Gaza in 2005. It removed all settlers, all military bases. It left functioning greenhouses, intact infrastructure. It was an opportunity for Palestinians to build a prosperous society. What happened? Hamas took power in 2007, destroyed the greenhouses, and launched thousands of rockets at Israel. It turned Gaza into a terrorist base and then blamed Israel for the blockade that followed. The truth no one wants to admit? If Hamas laid down its weapons tomorrow, there would be peace. If Israel laid down its weapons tomorrow, there would be genocide. That's the fundamental difference. Conclusion: the hidden truth revealed. So why does everyone want to destroy Israel? The answer isn't simple, but now you have the facts the media rarely presents together. 1. Theology. For Islamic extremists, the existence of a Jewish state on land they consider Islamic is theologically unacceptable. 2. Scapegoating. Arab authoritarian regimes use Israel to divert attention from their own failures. Instead of blaming corrupt dictators, their populations are taught to blame Israel. 3. Anti-Semitism, centuries-old hatred of Jews, hasn't disappeared. It's just disguised as anti-Zionism. When Israel is judged by standards never applied to any other nation, that's anti-Semitism. 4. Propaganda. Decades of misinformation, funded by petrodollars, have produced generations who believe false narratives about Israel. 5. Ignorance. Most people simply repeat what they hear, without researching historical facts or context. But here's the final truth. Israel isn't perfect. No country is. Israelis make mistakes, there are questionable policies, there are injustices. But the question isn't whether Israel is perfect. The question is, does Israel have the right to exist? And if your answer is no, then you must explain why the world's only Jewish state has no right to exist, while 57 Islamic states and dozens of Christian ones do, unquestioned. Israel is the size of New Jersey, with 0.1% of the world's population, no oil, no natural resources, and surrounded by enemies. Yet it has become a vibrant democracy, a technological powerhouse, and a beacon of freedom in a region dominated by authoritarianism. Maybe that's exactly why so many want to destroy it. Because Israel proves that success doesn't come from natural resources or land size. It comes from freedom, education, hard work, and responsible governance. And that's a truth many would rather keep hidden. If this video opened your eyes to facts you didn't know, hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel for more content that goes beyond superficial headlines. See you in the next video, where we'll continue revealing hidden truths that can change your perspective on the world.